The child was pronounced dead, wrapped in white, buried with prayers, and just as the shovel kissed the earth, he opened his eyes and named a murderer. The people of Idui rose before the sun that morning, not to prepare for war nor to harvest grain, but to bury the crown prince, Prince Ikundeo, born of Queen Mofian, heir to the rain throne, child of prophecy. His birth had been hailed with thunderless rain. His cry, strong enough to silence roosters. The kingdom had called him hope in a cradle. And then on the 9th day he died. No illness, no blood, no noise. Just silence where breath should have been. When the queen's nursemaid entered the nursery, she found him cold. Eyes closed, lips pale, fingers still curled into fists. A cradle full of stillness. The midwives wept and said, "He has returned to the gods early." The priest said, "He is a sacrifice, not a tragedy." But the queen? She said nothing. Not even when they took his body to be bathed and wrapped. Not even when they placed him in the smallest coffin ever carved by the royal woodworker. Not even when she watched them carry him toward the ancestral grove. She just stared, like the world had stolen something not from her body, but from her future. In Idui, royalty are not buried. They are planted, beneath the roots of the spirit trees that remember names. The funeral was attended by nobles, sages, palace workers, even visiting chiefs. All dressed in white. All humming the old lullaby of return. Sleep, spirit, sleep. The door is open. Come again when the land remembers. As the high priest lifted the ceremonial shovel to pour the first dust over the coffin, something strange happened. The wind paused. No breeze stirred the feathers on the queen's headdress. No leaf moved. Then the baby coughed. One soft cough. Then another. Then breath. The child's tiny chest rose. His eyes fluttered open. And then, in a voice far too old for his body, he said, "Stop. The earth cannot have me yet." The high priest stumbled backward. The nobles shrieked. The queen dropped to her knees. The baby sat upright in his coffin and pointed a single chubby finger at the gathering. "One among you has hands that drip silence." Gasps filled the grove. He turned slowly and pointed. "Adeshua, daughter of envy, sister of shadows. You poured silence into my milk. You chose power over blood." Princess Adeshua, the queen's sister-in-law and sister to the late king, staggered. "This is madness. The child is bewitched." But no one moved. Even the birds above held their wings still. The baby continued, "And for every day I speak, one name shall vanish, until the kingdom learns what it means to be silent no more." Then he laid back into the coffin, closed his eyes, but did not die. They carried him home not as corpse but as king. He did not cry, did not coo, did not play. He watched. The cradle was returned to the queen's chamber. She sat beside it, hands shaking. "Are you my child?" she whispered. "I am the memory of all your forgotten truths," came the reply. And that night someone vanished. At dawn, the palace baker Mako did not report to the kitchens. His wife found his apron still warm, his shoes at the door, a cup of half-sipped palm milk by the bed. But no body, no blood, only a single word, written in flour on the table. "Gossip." The queen summoned the oracle. She touched the cradle, eyes wide with revelation. "This is no ordinary child. He is a mirror, and Idui has been afraid of its reflection for far too long. Tradition demanded that a speaking infant be exorcised, but the priests refused. He speaks too old, too deep. This is no demon. This is memory made breath." Still the elders debated. Do we smother him? Do we silence the queen? Do we blame Adeshua and move on? But before any decision was made, the baby whispered again. "You speak of silencing me, while building palaces with the silence of others." And the next morning a guard vanished. His sword left in place. The word watcher carved into his shield. On the 7th day since he rose from his grave, the baby whispered again. "Mofian." His mother. And the palace cracked with silence so loud it sounded like thunder. The day the baby said the queen's name, the palace exhaled in dread. "Mofian," he whispered. No scream. No accusation. Just the weight of a name dropped like stone into still water. The queen did not flinch. But the servants who stood behind her? They did. One dropped a bowl. Another bit her tongue in fear, because only the queen knew what she'd hidden, and now so did her son. At the exact moment her name left the child's lips, every mirror in the royal court cracked. Not from top to bottom, but horizontally, as if dividing heaven from earth. Truth from legacy. When Mofian returned to her private quarters, she stood before her mirror. It showed two versions of her. One, the queen robed in white, eyes hard, jaw sharp. The other, a woman who once trembled at a dream she had the night before her husband died. A dream of a whisper in the dark. He will not live to see his son walk. The queen had buried that dream. She told no one. Not the priest. Not the oracle. Not even her own soul. Because if she had spoken it, she would have had to wonder, could I have stopped what happened next? She remembered that night clearly. King Aliyemi, her husband, strong and just, had returned from temple council with an uneasy face. There is unrest in the council. Adeshua grows bolder. What will you do? She had asked. Sleep. For now. He did not wake. They blamed a snake bite. But no fang marks were found. And Adeshua never cried at the funeral. Mofian had not told what she knew. Not because she was guilty, but because she was afraid of being believed. The Oracle of Ibo was summoned again. She entered blindfolded as always, barefoot, her fingers stained with chalk and crushed cola. She laid a hand on the cradle and whispered, "He is not here to shame you. He is here to show you." "Under what did I do?" the queen asked. "You chose silence over suspicion. Fear over fire. Is that a crime? When it leads to death, yes." The oracle led the queen to a hidden chamber beneath the palace, a place only known to rulers and recorders. In its center, a pool of dark water. "Drink," the oracle commanded. Mofian dipped her fingers into the black liquid. It tasted of smoke and salt. And then the visions came. Her husband coughing blood into his pillow. A servant removing a cup from the king's side. A shadowed figure exchanging a vial in the garden. And finally, herself, standing still, saying nothing. She opened her eyes, gasping. It was Adeshua. "Yes," the oracle said, "but you are the gate through which her crime passed into silence." By the 10th day of the child speaking, 20 people had vanished. No bodies, no noise, just objects and words. The queen once beloved was now feared. Whispers filled the streets. If the queen was warned, why did she stay silent? Did she protect Adeshua? Did she seek the throne? What else is buried beneath that palace? To answer these, the queen did something no monarch had ever done. She summoned the people into the courtyard and stood with bare feet before the sacred tree. She bowed her head. "Before the gods, before my ancestors, before my people. I speak a truth I have buried in fear. I dreamed my husband would die. I saw shadows in the court. I heard whispers in my sleep. And I did nothing. I was not the poisoner. But I was the silence. Forgive me, or let the river take me." The wind howled once and stilled. The baby stirred in his cradle, and whispered. She did not lie. She only waited too long. That night no one vanished. Instead, across the palace walls, words appeared, etched in glowing moss. There is punishment. There is guilt. And there is truth that aches instead of kills. And for the first time the baby smiled. Not because someone had fallen, but because someone had stood up for what they had once buried. And in that moment the people realized, this was not a child of vengeance. This was a child of reckoning. 20 names had vanished. Each one taken after a whisper from the royal cradle. No body. No blood. Only objects left behind and a single word. Gossip. Greed. Watcher. Silence. But by the 21st day something began to shift. The vanishings didn't just take people. They began to give back. The first sign came in the palace kitchen. Mako's wife, now working as lead cook, opened the brick oven to find more than warm coals. Inside, where the bread should have been, lay a note. It was folded in the shape of a baby's shirt. Written in flour. Edges smoking softly. He heard something. He told the guard. The guard told the wrong ears. Beneath it sat one copper coin, the exact kind used to bribe palace staff. And the word fear. Soon more objects began to respond. A carpenter's hammer sang when held at dusk. A seamstress's needle pricked only liars. A servant's lantern flickered when someone entered a room with guilt. Each item, belonging to someone vanished, held residual memory. The oracle called it ghost breath. The child in the cradle slept through it all, but his breath moved in rhythm with the objects, like they were syncing with his heartbeat. A young servant boy, Obiora, only 12 years old, became obsessed with the objects. He collected them at night. He arranged them in patterns, spoke to them, waited for them to respond, and one night they did. The queen found him sitting in a circle made of a cracked bracelet, a blood-stained apron, a broken earring, a strip of priest's robe. He looked up and said, "They're saying they didn't want to be forgotten." Then the candle blew out, and Obiora was gone. Where the boy had sat, only his sandals remained, and a message carved into the stone floor. Curious. The queen wept for the first time since the vanishings began. He was just a child. The oracle touched the carving. So was the one in the cradle. By the 25th day, strange humming echoed through the palace halls at dusk. Not music, not chanting, memories. A priest's voice mid-sermon, a mother laughing, a scream smothered too quickly. They came from objects, walls, even mirrors. No one could sleep, but no one dared run, because they feared what might be waiting for them outside, or inside themselves. In the ancestral hall, a harp began to play by itself. Its strings moved like wind, but there was no wind. The song was familiar. The queen gasped. It was our wedding song. Then came the voice. You trusted gold. You trusted silence. Now trust remembrance. It was the voice of King Aliyemi, long dead. And he did not sound angry. He sounded resigned. On the 26th day, after 4 days of silence, Prince Ikundeo finally opened his mouth. He said, "You are asking where they've gone. But you should ask, why did they leave this behind?" He pointed at his cradle, at its carved wooden edges, at the script no one recognized. The oracle gasped. "These are not decorations. They are markings of a path." "A path to where?" asked the queen. "To the memory that was stolen." The villagers, once afraid of the baby, now brought objects to the palace. A ring that burned when a liar touched it. A doll that cried when left alone. A comb that echoed secrets whispered into it. They laid them before the cradle, hoping their ancestors would be heard. The baby looked at the pile, smiled once, then whispered, "Balance must be paid." And the river dried up overnight. Fish died. Boats cracked. Cattle wandered off, confused. And across the riverbed, etched into the clay in green moss, was one sentence. One name remains unspoken. The queen looked to the oracle. Who? The one the kingdom dared never to name. Adeshua. Say it where the river can hear you, the oracle replied. And so the queen walked barefoot to the river's edge and whispered, Adeshua. The wind froze, and the river turned red, not blood but memory made water. And in the silence the baby said, "Tao we begin." When the queen spoke the name Adeshua at the river's edge, the water turned the color of sorrow. Not blood, but something older. Something woven with grief, truth, and names never buried right. And in that moment a crack echoed, not in the sky but under the palace. The throne trembled. The baby stirred in his cradle and said, "You are afraid of me because I speak." But the one who lies below spoke nothing. And that silence still curses your crown. The oracle ordered a circle of priests to gather. They lit no candles. They chanted no hymns. Instead they pressed their ears to the palace floor. And one by one they began to weep. There is someone buried here. Not beneath the earth, beneath your rule. The queen's voice cracked. Who? The oracle whispered a name that had not been spoken in over 70 years. Obiajalu. Obiajalu had once been a name scribbled in the margins of palace history. Firstborn of Queen Menina. Not born of the king but of her lover before the political marriage. A child with too much heart and not enough convenience. He had lived only 7 years, then vanished. They told the people he had gone to study abroad. But no letters came. No messengers returned. And no one asked questions. Because they all knew what happened to inconvenient heirs in a palace built on perfection. Under the throne room, the earth groaned as guards pulled stone tiles away. Beneath was a space no bigger than a sleeping mat. Inside it, a child's skeleton, a pendant with the royal crest, and a toy carved from mango wood still whole. The queen fell to her knees. "This was our foundation?" The oracle nodded. "You built your rule on the ribs of a forgotten prince. And that prince, his silence, has multiplied." That night the baby wept for the first time. Not loud, not bitter, just a tear. And from his mouth came a whisper. He was not born to rule, but to remind. Yet you buried him and every memory that followed. He turned his head and said, "I carry what he could not say." And then he slept. But the palace did not, because silence now walked its halls like thunder. Just before dawn, Princess Adejua entered the throne room. No guards, no attendants, only her and her shadow. She looked at the skeleton, then at the cradle, then at her sister-in-law. "You thought I was the curse. You murdered my son," the queen spat. "I did, because the palace taught me that only ruthless children survive. And I never wanted to disappear like him." She pointed to Obiajalu's bones. "I was 12 when they hid him. I learned what a name was worth." The oracle approached. "One more name must vanish to complete the circle, or the vanishings will never stop." The queen looked to her son. "Is it you?" "No," the child said. "I am the echo, not the ending." "Is it me?" "You confessed. You changed. You planted." They turned to Adejua. She stood tall. "Let it be me. Not in punishment," the oracle clarified. "In payment. Then take me." And she walked barefoot to the cradle, kissed the baby's head, and vanished. No scream, no glow, just gone. Only her royal ring remained, inscribed with one word, unspoken. That night the river flowed again, clear, calm, and wide. And the throne room was left empty, because no one could sit atop the forgotten ever again. The throne room stood silent. No voice ruled it. No crown sat upon it. No feet dared to cross the patch of earth that once held the forgotten child. Above it, moonlight pooled on bare stone. Below it, the river whispered again. And in a cradle now made of vines and old cloth, the baby Prince Ikundeo smiled in his sleep. At dawn, he woke without crying. He blinked once at the queen. She, now a woman without a title but full of memory, leaned close. He whispered, "They buried Obiajalu. They buried truth. They buried story. But from burial comes roots. And from roots comes the kingdom that should have been." Then he reached his hand toward the sky and vanished. No glow, no song, just stillness. And in his place a sapling. It grew fast. By nightfall the sapling had stretched tall, its bark soft as skin, its leaves shaped like tongues and hands. Every leaf whispered. Some whispered names of the vanished. Others whispered regrets. Some whispered laughter too sacred to have been forgotten. The queen sat beneath it, not as ruler, as witness. And the people gathered not to worship, but to listen. On the 7th night, during the rain ritual, a child named Ioka placed her palm on the trunk. It pulsed with warmth. She turned to her mother and said, "He says he's still here. He says, we're the kingdom now." The oracle nodded. "He does not rule anymore. He roots. And rooted truth outlives spoken power." The palace was abandoned. In its place, under the sacred tree, a circle of stone seats was laid, not for rulers but for reminders. Every moon cycle the people gathered. They brought names they feared to say, stories they were told to forget, objects left behind by those who had vanished. And the tree hummed. It did not judge. Remembered. Years passed. But those who vanished, they came back not in body but in dreams. A husband appeared beside his wife, guiding her hand during childbirth. A guard appeared to his son, warning him of betrayal. A priest whispered a new hymn to his apprentice in sleep. And sometimes when the wind blew strong enough, the voices would return to the tree, singing a lullaby only the ancestors knew. She never took a new crown, never lived in gold again. She swept the roots of the tree each morning. She washed its leaves with water from the river. Children called her grandmother of memory. And she told every one of them, "This is not just a tree. It is the child you almost forgot. It is every truth you wanted to erase. And it is your future, if you dare to remember." And so Idui rose again. Not on power, Not on silence, but on remembrance. Because in the end, the dead don't always want revenge. Sometimes, they just want to be planted,